Hey, welcome to Chaplain Chat. This is so cool. I've got my high school friend, Mike, and we look the same as we did in high school, don't we? Yes, Mike, welcome to Chaplain Chat.
Well, thank you, John. Glad to be here.
Oh, it is great. It's glad we connected everything too. I got to tell you, of course,
Yeah.
we're so techy with all our technology. Mike, this is really a hoot because a couple of weeks ago, I don't know, a couple 3 weeks ago, you got a hold of me to tell me our good friend Nick passed away. And and actually I did call Susie, his wife, but his daughters wanted to talk to me because I have the joy, and this is going to be September 2nd, I believe. I'm going to
Yes.
do a celebration of life service for Nick over in his daughter's house. And oh boy, we've been connecting. Neat Christian lady, Mike. Very impressed. And we knew, I've known Nick since sixth grade, but you've known Nick. How long have you known Nick?
Well, about the same, John. I
Okay.
actually met Nick at Los Coyotes in seventh grade. So, you know,
Okay. And actually, I don't. We didn't really connect much in high school. We connect a little bit more in high school. Yeah, we went to Los Coyotes Junior High. And so, and Nick, um, oh, plethora of memories of Nick. And when you told me that, I had to let it sink in a bit, and that he had passed. Neat Christian guy. It always cracked me up about Nick. I have to tell you, he in high school, I wouldn't call him a good-looking guy like you and I are. You know, but and he was kind of, and it wasn't that he was very slow on. I mean, not slow, but I don't think he ever dated in high school or anything. I don't know, maybe he did. But when he got married, the first gal he married was drop dead gorgeous. I mean, she was what I go, how? And and then they had two daughters, and then she left them. I mean, just blah blah blah. And that was a crusher. And then it was a while later on that he met a second wife, Susie, and she's a good-looking girl. I didn't go, and I got to marry them. And when we were at the 30th high school reunion, we've had a 50th, but the 30th, very fancy hotel, dressed up. All I did, Nick just wore his Hawaiian shirt. Didn't matter to Nick, but we're sitting at the same table, which is neat, and we're all at the table, and uh, and Nick and I had to crush we had a crush on the same girl in high school. We never did anything about it. Belinda. And she was there. And she, well, she didn't age real well, like you and I age great. And I said to Nick, I said, and I'm thinking my wife Gail wasn't at that, but I'm looking at his wife. I'm looking. I said, we did pretty good, didn't we? Nick goes, yeah, we did. So anyway, that was the story about Nick. And but Mike, and you can share about Nick too. But how I want to hand it over to you is we got the talking, and we're connecting a lot more now. I'm just so stoked. Um, you talked about how AA was a turning point in your life, and so tell me about that.
okay. Well, thanks for the opportunity, John. I like sharing about AA because it has been a turning point. It's it's um, it's amazing the changes that happened for me as a result of attending AA meetings
Wow.
and hanging out with a bunch of drunks. I I started drinking quite young. I was like 15 years old when I had my first um, when I first drank to being like high, not necessarily falling down drunk, but and I
Well,
knew it was something that I really liked. And at that age, you know, I was completely enthralled with the idea of on my weekends going and getting some beer any way I could and things like that. And of course, over the years, the problem grew. When I was in high school and at that very young age and stuff, most people wouldn't have noticed that I was drinking on a weekend or anything. But um, I was, not every weekend, but a lot of them. And then as I grew into adulthood, then that's when the ism really took
Well,
hold. And I was one of those people that a lot of people say, well, you were a functional alcoholic. And for years I said, yeah, I was. I've been sober now for 9 years. And when I first got involved, yes, I was a functional because I went to work every day. I did my job. I uh, promoted in my job chronically. I just kept moving up, the ladder and stuff, and doing all of that while I was, spending my evenings inebriated and sometimes falling down drunk and being stupid at home and a number of other things, But um, this went on throughout my adult life. Um, I think I hid it pretty well from a lot of people, but I couldn't hide it from myself, obviously, nor my family. So when I was 64 years old,
wow. Wow.
I had just turned, well, I was probably 64 in a couple months anyway. uh, I don't know what came over me, but I was completely um, ready to do something about it. Now, I had quit drinking before. I had had a occasion to have some heart surgery back in 1998, and the nurse who took care of me, or one of the nurses, she said, "You know, you really should give up alcohol now. This would be the time to do it because you've had this heart incident, you've had some pretty massive surgery, and it wouldn't be smart to go back to drinking." And I looked at her and said, "What do you mean go back to drinking?" She says, "Well, I can tell you drink." She goes, "It's obvious to me." She says, "I lived with a family of people like you." At any rate, she got my attention, and I did quit for 6 months. But I was doing that grit your teeth and just hold on kind of quitting, was that was the way I was trying to kick myself away from booze. Anyway, the first time I went back to work, and I did a lot of traveling back then. The first time I actually traveled out of town, the temptation was too great. I started drinking again and was off to the races, you know. But like I say, at 64, I decided it's time to do something about it. And uh, I asked my daughter, she was with us at the time at the house, and I said, "Would you mind looking for an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting for me? Just go online or whatever it takes." And she found one. She found one that was very close to our home. I was not aware of it ever, but and I'd never been to an AA meeting, so didn't know what I was in for. But the next day, she went with me, and we went to an AA meeting, and I met some of the most wonderful people. Um, the first person I met was a gentleman named Ken, who became my sponsor for the next 7 years. And then he got pretty ill, and he gave up sponsorship because it was just too much for him. He was on chemotherapy and things, and but he was just a wonderful person, always there for me, and wise. If you'd seen him on the street and you had a conversation with us, you'd say probably, this man's probably 70% hillbilly. He sprung out of somewhere in the deep South or off some cowboy ranch back in 1860, but he was so wise. So I learned a lot about human nature and what wisdom is and those kind of things. Somebody bought me a big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, big book, which I guess you could kind of correlate with the Bible, and if for an alcoholic, but but I met so many other people who were so much help to me. And they, well, that daughter who took me to my first meeting about 6 months into my sobriety, she had a real bad car accident. And we thought we were going to lose her. She'd had a pretty bad brain injury and almost died. And she was in a coma for quite a while and everything. And these people at AA were bringing my wife and I meals. You know, we'd come home and on the porch there'd be these thermal containers with, meals in them, and they just reached out and were trying to help and just full of good wishes and praying for us and just everything. And that was a bonding that I can still get pretty emotional over because it just meant so much to have their love. Um, but at any rate, I've continued on. I've learned so many things about the spiritual side of my life that I wasn't really reaching out for, before AA. I've always been, uh, I always have been what I consider a Christian. Believed in Jesus as my savior, and um, but I wasn't living the life really. So AA handed me back to God in a lot of ways, and I've grown tremendously as a result. I when I tell people that I haven't had a drink in 9 years, people who drink now and have been drinking for a while and stuff, and are thinking about, they need to change their lives and things. They just think in terms of what have you done for 9 years? I mean, if you drank that long till you were 64 years of age, how did you entertain yourself when you stopped drinking? And I told her, hey, I got to know me. I got to know this guy, and not just Mike Stotts, but the inner person. Really get. I guess the best word would be to say I found a lot of inner peace, and I discovered life too, which is another thing about this. Is you discover that life is a gift, and you can be told that all your life, but till you realize it in your heart and everything,
Hmm.
it doesn't mean a whole lot. So I did. I discovered life and the joy of my family that I didn't have before.
Hmm.
Don't get me wrong. Everybody loves their family or should, and I did. And my kids and everything were all very important to me. But I had that um, that roadblock of alcoholism and addiction. And I use the word addiction because I believe alcohol is an addiction, just like any other street drug or anything. Fortunately for me, I didn't get into that, but uh, it's just been a blessing all the way around. And I've got a number of good friends. Life has changed enormously in the last 9 years in what some of it wasn't real good changes, but at the same time, I'm handling them so much better than I ever would have before. Uh, I've learned how to meditate and pray in a way that is meaningful. And my emotions are right here. They're when I heard Nick had passed, I cried for 2 days. I love that man. Always will. He was such a good friend, and he was so proud of me for walking away from that alcohol issue and problem. And when we were in school at Los Coyotes, he and I were in the band, and he had such an interesting sense of humor. It was dry and it was very casual. Sometimes you didn't know whether to laugh or not. But I remember walking up to the band room, and he was in gym class, and I was before band, and I was somewhere else. I can't remember what class. Really isn't important, but the gym was a lot closer to the band room. So I'd walk up, and he'd always be standing on the porch outside the classroom, and he'd say, "Mike, how's the wife and kids?" Now, that's for a seventh grader hearing that for the first time was like, "Who is this guy?" and and I didn't laugh because I thought, "What's what's the matter with you?" You know? But
Oh my.
he he grew on me every day, obviously, and we've been lifelong friends.
You know, Mike, I wanted to ask you, um, in your own, your relationship with God now, in a sentence or two, what is your relationship with God now at this moment like for you?
Well, there's a prayer in AA that it means so much to me. I mean, everybody knows the Serenity Prayer, even non-alcoholics know that,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
This is one, it's called the third step prayer. And it kind of it goes, God, I offer myself to thee. Okay. And that's how it starts out. And that was the first thing. I can say I'm a believer and everything else, but I haven't offered myself up to
amen,
God until I
amen.
got there, you know.
Wow,
And
yeah,
you know, and it says to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, because every alcoholic is a narcissist and is so self-indulgent and has ego big as you know, as the sky, you know. And those are things that I had to learn uh, to do for God, you
amen.
know, rely on His will and
Yeah,
turn my
yeah.
life over, you know.
You know,
And
Mike, I guy, I'm just this is fantastic. And I think if people even want to know more about AA, well, you can Google AA. There's ways you can connect with it. I was even impressed with your daughter going with you, because if you go to an AA meeting, just occurred, you can go with a friend. You know, I mean, there's a lot of ways. Uh, Mike, I just want to thank you so much
oh,
for being on Chaplain Chat, sharing your testimony. And folks, I hope and pray this you'll be, if you're having that struggle, that wrestling, you know, of a friend who's struggling and wrestling, and you're listening to Mike, our prayers that this will give you a tool uh, to see, help a friend or help yourself totally be free. And I want to thank you guys for watching Chaplain Chat.